Well, hello, everybody. This is Timothy Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the Rattlecast. We're the biggest freewheeling, live-streaming poetry podcast on the planet, in your ears and on your laptops. Our guest for episode number 351 is Joanna Preston. She'll be here in a few minutes, but before I get in, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Leave reviews on Amazon or Spotify or iTunes. Whatever you can do to help spread poetry around the internet, we much appreciated. We're going to start out like we always do with our Poets Respond poet. And it's been a while since we've had a fire poem, but the fires are the main story coming out of, I think, the North America probably this week. And Eleanor Colligan is here. Hey, Eleanor, how you doing?
I'm good, other than the fires.
Yeah, and so you're actually up. You're based in Brooklyn, but you're up in Canada right now. Are you? How is it? How is it there? First of all, it seems like it might be worse there than in Chicago and New York, and where poems are coming in
Yeah.
so often.
Yeah, what's interesting is the air quality in Chicago obviously depends where you are, but it was actually worse for a little bit because of like wind and stuff like that. But now I'm back up north, so the air quality is once again. I think we're at like 147 where I'm staying in Saskatchewan, so it's pretty bad up here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I was in the mountains in Southern California for about 10 years while doing the show, or 15 maybe. And, we'd have days like that too, where the fires were, just depends on the wind and where the smoke goes. And there's little maps you can follow of where it's going to be and estimates of when. So why did you end up writing this poem? What was it about? You mentioned in your note seeing those signs on the roads. Is that when you knew you wanted to write a poem about it, or how did the poem come to be?
Yeah, I think I come here like every year and just it I'm sure it's been going on for longer, but at least in recent memory, it feels like it's really gotten worse and worse in the past 3 years, like just exponentially so. And like last year when we were here, there was like literally ash like coming down from the sky, and there was like a voluntary evacuation in place in Waskesiu, which is where like my family is and where we visit. So I think really it's probably started germinating there a year ago, just being like, wow, this is so crazy. And then just the experience of it kind of happening again. And just not only is nothing being done about it, but it's just like, give more funding to the US military, which, as I mentioned in the poem, is like the institutionally, I believe, the top greenhouse gas emitter, which obviously take all studies with just a grain of salt of like the data sets we have available. But I do think, considering the US is like historically the top greenhouse gas emitter and like so much funding goes to the US military, I don't think that is like a crazy conclusion to make, and definitely not out of the ballpark.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, you want to go ahead and read the poem?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Okay. How can a fire be political? And I want to learn German because I like picking a language apart, but the smoke's so thick you can see it even at night while conscious. The papers blaze on about the housing market, and my mother tries to get me to promise I'll have someone's child by 30, but when I walk to work, there's the climate clock saying we've got 5 years until we're dead, and I wonder why the climate clock is aimed at us, the general public taking public transit, as if the world's greatest polluter, breath, isn't the aptly named Department of Defense. So shouldn't the climate clock really be installed outside the White House or the G7 summit, or beamed onto one of Bezos's house in some far-off sea? And when my well-meaning aunt asks how a fire can be political, I say, in the same way a highway can be racist, that it's not the highway itself, but its construction and our response, by who's considered and who's purposely lost. Apparently it's hard to understand me under the mask.
Yeah, that's a great poem and a cool concept too, structuring it that way with the smoky mist, the conscious of my breath hovering there on the side of the poem too. Really fascinating poem and really powerful, and definitely an important topic to be talking about. So thanks so much for sharing that, Eleanor. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yep, thanks. Take care. Yeah, so it was Eleanor Colligan with How Can a Fire Be Political? That was our Poets Respond poem of the week. If you'd like to submit any poems about current events, all you have to do is go to rattle.com under content. You'll find Poets Respond and submit your poems by midnight Friday night. And of course, you'll get those poems in your inbox if you sign up for our daily poem by email. And that's at the bottom, the footer of any page. So put your email address in there, make sure you click the confirmation link, and you'll get poems like that every Sunday morning and another poem every day. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Joanna Preston. So sit tight and we'll be right back with a whole lot more poetry. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Joanna Preston, an Australia-born, New Zealand-based poet, editor, and creative writing tutor. Joanna is the author of The Summer King, which won the Kathleen Grattan Award and Mary Gilmore Award, and Tumble, winner of the Mary and Peter Briggs Award for Poetry. She has appeared in our Invented Form section of our Summer 2026 issue, sharing a decima. So we'll talk about that, and we'll see one of those later in the show, too. But how you doing, Joanna? It's great to see you.
Thanks for inviting me. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, well, it's definitely my pleasure. And you're in New Zealand, which is great. So it's a nice time of the day. It's like noon there, I think.
It is. It's a lovely midday here in beautiful Aotearoa. Very grey, unfortunately. So I have lights on and I have a fire going in the far side of the room. So yeah, quite different weather. It's about 8 degrees here at the moment. So lovely.
Yeah, quite different. I think it's 108 here in Texas. So, so let's start out right away with a poem. And you were going to start out. The first poem you had was "The Pride of Lions" from an earlier book, and it's a part of a different, longer poem. So why don't you go ahead and read that and maybe explain the context a little?
I'll give you a little bit of the context first, maybe. It's a sequence called venery, which is based on the collective nouns that you find in old dictionaries. I am a word nerd. Most of them apparently, excuse me, go back to the Book of St. Albans, which was published by a really interesting woman called Dame Juliana Berner, who was believed to have invented most of them. And it was the right words to use for different sorts of hawking and hounding and heraldry, all of those sorts of noble pursuits, so that you didn't look like an oik. You knew the correct way of describing things. And they're wonderfully subversive when you start looking into them. I mean, superfluity of nuns. How many nuns is too many nuns? And impertinence of peddlers. Some of them we've kept going. And I started playing around with them. And the sequence ended up being a description of venery, the practice of venery, which has two meanings: hunting, but also the pursuit of sexual pleasure. And so they end up with this wonderfully weird mixture of sex and violence, which sells, apparently. So this is the first poem in the sequence, The Pride of Lions. But before we could marry, he became a lion, thick-pelted and rich with the musk of beast. The switch to all fours was not easy, all his weight slung from the blades of his shoulders. His deltoids knotted like teak burls, and I burnished them as he slept. Burrs matted his mane, and for days he would not let me groom him, slapped me away with a swayed paw, snarled against my throat. He would not eat fruit or drink milk, but tore meat from the bones I provided. His claws caught in the carpet, so I stripped the rugs from the floor and polished the boards until they gleamed and rang with the chime of his nails. I stroke his saffron hide and tangle my fingers deep in his ruff. Draw him up around me, ardent as the gleam of his topaz eyes, the hypnotic lash of his tail, the rasp of his tongue on my thighs.
Yeah, so that was The Pride of Lions, an earlier poem from Joanna Preston. Joanna, I love hearing just the backstories of how poets become poets. And I know you grew up in a rural area of Australia. And how is it that you found poetry and began writing it?
I don't think I ever had a choice. I grew up in a very book-friendly family. I have lots and lots of teachers. I always tell people that my English grammar and things are totally theoretical because I didn't get taught them formally, but I grew up raised by pedants, which is like being raised by wolves, but a little bit less venison and a little bit more emphasis on wearing trousers. And my grandmother used to always tell me stories, and my parents bought my brother and I books. So yeah, I always loved reading. I always loved making up stories, making up plays, making up songs for my brother and my cousins when we were together at holidays. But apparently when I was about 4, I said my grandmother overheard me saying a really florid goodbye to the river. We would always spend holidays at my grandparents' farm. And she then went back and told everybody that I was going to be a poet. Did not tell me until I'd actually started publishing things. But yeah, she was the one who kept saying, oh, keep writing, do it. Don't be a wuss, do it. Mm-hmm. Which was quite amazing. And then when I eventually did decide I was going to try writing seriously, she was the one who just said, yeah, of course. Yes, you were always going to do that. I've just been waiting for you to do it, which was kind of wonderful. But yeah, I was lucky I had a really, really good English teacher for my last 3 years at high school. Like a lot of kids, I'd fallen in and out of love with poetry in school because if you're taught it badly, it takes the joy out of it, I think, for a lot of people. But then when you get a really good teacher, it makes all the difference in the world. And so we were studying John Donne and 17, 18-year-olds giggling at all of the dirty bits in John Donne. And then my teacher, Grant Andrews, pointed out all of the ones we'd missed, which was even funnier. And I basically fell in love with it irrevocably from then on. And I've been, writing ever since.
Yeah, that's interesting. Say more about the falling in love and out of it bit. What is it that you fall in love with and then why fall out of it? Because it is so interesting. I think, that if you look at the number of people who are poets these days or read poetry regularly, it's a pretty small percentage. But if you look at the number of people who at one time wrote poems, it's a pretty large percentage. And so there is this, and a lot of people do leave it and come back. And, they in the back of their head, our founder, Alan Fox, is one of those people. He would love poetry as a teenager and then a little bit in college, then kind of left it and then came back after age 50. So what do you think of it? What is it that you fall in love with? And then why doesn't that love stick around all the time?
I don't know. But part of it, I think, is that a lot of people are taught it badly. They're taught to pull it to pieces in a way that doesn't... It's not about how to understand the poem better. It's how to pass an exam. And a lot of, particularly English teachers, I take my hats off to them. I could not be a teacher. I'm a creative writing tutor, and I make a very big distinction between the two. It means I don't have to be quite so academic. But it's if you're just trying to get people through a syllabus and get them to pass an exam, you're not going to impart a heck of a lot of love. And poetry needs time. It needs you to slow down. I tell my students it's the difference between eating at McDonald's and going to a really fancy restaurant. McDonald's might be all you need sometimes, and that's great, and that's normal reading. A poem is more like a really, really fancy dinner where you could just wolf it all down, but you're missing the point of it. And you need to actually want to linger, I think. You need to want to slow down and just take it in and give it the time it needs. Plus, a lot of people, I think, get put off by free verse. If no one explains to them what's going on there, if they're not encouraged to read it out loud, I always make my students read things out loud because you get so much more that way. And if you don't understand what a poem is doing, it can be very hard to understand why it's a poem. And things like postmodernism, if you don't understand the literary theory behind the poem, you've got no way in. And there is, I think, a lot of poetry that gets given to people as, oh, this is the new stuff. And if you're not shown a way in, if you've never learnt a way in, and you don't have that itch yourself to do it. You're not going to find your way into a poem,
Mm-hmm.
which is a real shame because we're actually living at, I think, the best time for poetry in many ways. Anything you want, whatever your particular desire is in a poem, someone out there is writing it and more people are out there publishing it. It's so hard to find. So for the last 15 years, one of the things I've been doing, well, pretty much the only thing that earns money, is teaching creative writing to people and bringing them in. And I think there's more people out there who love poetry than you realize. It's just, we're all told, oh no one reads poetry anymore. And so you don't come out and say you're a poet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I definitely think that's true. And it sounds like, music is such an important part of your poetry. And reading your poems, you can tell that. There's such an attention to that, the sound of the voice rolling through and your tongue in your mouth, that dance that's so great when you love language and love to dance that way, like dancing with speech. How do you define what a poem is? That's one of the questions we get all the time. Like what is, some people will say, oh, that's prose with line breaks, it's for free verse,
Yep.
and then there will be prose poems too. And somehow these are poems as well. And it's sort of baffling, especially people early on, like talking about falling in love with poetry, like telling people what a poem is sometimes a fraught thing. So what is a poem to you?
I could give, there's always the quotes of things like the synthesis of hyacinth and biscuits, which I like. Words with the dial turned up all the way, I think would be the way I'd put it. Music's important. It's not the only thing. Otherwise, that's la 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 glossolalia. But yeah, I think words concentrated to their most potent form, where everything is working together. It's got to be music. It's got to be an idea of some sort. It has to be sensitivity to the language. But yeah, I'm kind of less definite about what a poem is and what a poem isn't now, just because I've had so many people show me exceptions to every step. Anytime I come up with what I think is a good guideline, someone will show me a brilliant poem that does the opposite. Yeah, music and words. It's the Edgar Allan Poe quote, music when combined with an intriguing idea is poetry. Without music or the intriguing idea, colour becomes pallor, man becomes carcass, home becomes catacomb, and the dead are but for a moment motionless. Which it's a great way of not really answering the question, I think.
That definitely is. That's great, though. I've never heard that before, but I definitely agree with that quote. Yeah, well, really well said. Katie Dozier in the next room over wants to know, which poets do you think are the best to show to students in particular? You mentioned John Dryden, I think, before.
John Donne.
Oh, John Donne before. And so who do you find is the best to introduce your students today and, in 2026?
Modern poets, probably Billy Collins is always safe because he's funny. He's not challenging. I think he's a lot better poet than he often lets himself be. So I'm very picky about the things I'll show my students. If you go to the British poets, people like Carol Ann Duffy has some wonderful poems that are they're musical, but they're not obviously poetic. So they're not teaching, you're not leading students down a bad path. I'm trying to think who else would be. In New Zealand, James Norcliffe, who is a dear friend and a wonderful mentor to me, is also an incredibly good poet. His poems are amazingly funny, but there's always that little sting in them that makes you go, oh, I need to reread that. I need to think about that again. So yeah, I think poets to introduce people to, they have to be things that you like. It's really hard to convince someone that this is a good poem if you personally don't like it. Although I try and make sure I do that occasionally just to keep me honest. But a poem that feels right to you, that you can read out loud, that you can dive into. Again, one of the things I do when I'm teaching is I do a lot of close reading with my students. We'll quite often take a book by somebody and pick half a dozen poems from it and go through and try and understand what's happening, why is it in this order, what are the things in this poem that work for us, that don't work for us. I usually try and encourage them to disagree with me because we have the most interesting arguments and discussions when we're disagreeing. But yeah, things that you love, you don't necessarily have to understand all of it. It's a bit like a poem this is where poetry and music are so much closer. We don't ask, what does a symphony mean? It just is. It can bring up an emotional context. It can be evoking a time or a place or a mood or event. but you don't try and just bring it down into a couple of words. And I think poems are like that. Sometimes they are just beautiful evocations of music. They're tone poems. I'm not sure how a poem can be a tone poem, but we'll go with that for the minute.
Yeah. Well, I definitely agree. Let's hear another poem. Parable of the Drought is the one next up, and this is the last poem from Summer King.
Yeah, put my lovely book cover up so people can see it. I'm very proud of that cover. Parable of the Drought was one of the ones that I had on the go for a very, very long time. I had the idea in my head of just, again, growing up in the bush, I lived in a place where we had the last 4.5 years of what at the time was the worst drought on record. And it didn't rain for 4 years.
Wow.
As in not at all. And the day the drought broke was just incredible. I mean, it was more than 40 years ago and I can still smell it. And there were children there who'd never seen it rain and who were absolutely terrified. So trying to explain to people, particularly people in the cities for whom a drought is just, oh, you can't water the garden, or, well, you have to pay a bit more for water, how absolutely brutal it is. I couldn't find a way into writing that. And then someone had shown me Wilfred Owen's Parable of the Old Man and the Young, which is his incredible poem about World War One. And it just gave me a way to start writing it. So it took about a year to get from the beginning to the end. It was one of my slower ones. Parable of the Drought. He got up from the narrow bed and shaved off his beard, rinsing his face and the razor with a last mugful of fresh water. He dressed and waited for sunlight through the window to wake the boy. They walked all morning, following the sun and the line of fence posts that shimmered west. He looked only once at the sky, shading his eyes when a black cockatoo flew overhead. When they came to broken country, the bloodwood and gidgee sucked the shade back into themselves. Heat smashed against the gibbers. He kissed the boy's forehead and held his skinny shoulders, breathing his scent of smoke and dust and sweat and a sweetness that for a moment could have been his wife. He slid his fingers into the boy's hair, just like a weather, he thought, just like a you. He watched until the boy's eyes lost their brilliance, the same brittle blue as the sky that even now refuses to cloud.
Yeah, beautiful poem. That was Parable of the Drought from Summer King by Joanna Preston. You mentioned close reading being something that's really important to you as a teacher. And can you talk a little bit more about that? What do you mean by close reading, and what are the kinds of things that you sort of unearth when you're going through a poem at that depth? I guess what I'm wondering, is it mostly, figuring out, like a poem is a machine, how things work? Is that the angle you're taking, or appreciating things? Go into a little bit about what you mean by close reading.
All of those, really. A wonderful New Zealand novelist, Owen Marshall, came up with the metaphor of taking the back off the clock. If you want to tell the time, you look at the face, and that's great. But if you want to understand how the time is told and how it all works, you have to take the back off and start rummaging around. So really, I don't have a background in literary theory. My university English was 1 year, and I did very badly. But I come to everything as a reader and as a writer. I'm always looking for, what can I see that the poet's doing? What are the choices they've made that have brought the poem to make it do what it's doing for me? So we usually dive in. I go on structure and sound and sense. Structure, so simple things. Is it a form? Is it a sonnet? Is it a limerick? Is it a haiku? How many stanzas are there? Why? Because a poem in one big stanza is a very different beast to a poem in couplets, for example. They feel totally different. And I love putting things up on boards and splitting them apart and playing around with that in front of my students and seeing how that changes it. Structural things like that, even things like looking at punctuation. The poem actually that gave me that one as a really useful key was Don Patterson's poem Imperial. It's a wonderful book called 52 Ways of Looking at a Poem by Ruth Padel, which is a series of essays on different poems and close readings of them. It's an amazing book. I really loved it. And this poem by Don Patterson comes across just as a sort of simple bloke bragging about having had sex with a virgin, and you just think, ugh, really? And it's from a book called God's Gift to Women, which is ironic as a title, but is kind of not ironic. So I just sort of rolled my eyes and abandoned the poem and thought, no, don't bother. And then she pointed out something interesting about it, which is there is not a single full stop in the entire poem, and how incredibly different things look when you start realizing that how much indeterminacy that brings in. So something just as simple as, are there a lot of commas? Is this poem hesitating as it moves, or is it just racing straight through to the end? Is it very determined and very stopping? I mean, lots of full stops, that's someone who's certain of what they're saying. It gives it a different tone to the voice, a different sort of sense to how you understand it. And once you start looking at things like that, you go, oh my God, there is no limit to how deep you can go when you're picking things apart. And yeah, you try and then bring some of those things to your own work. What are the metaphors doing? What are the images that the poet's using? Do they tell a different story to the one that the poem is suggesting? Another one of those that was quite useful for me was, oh gosh, now it's a Ted Hughes poem. I think it's called Hands, and it's talking about his father-in-law. And the description, when you pull apart when you just look at the images and the series of images he's using, he's talking about the man getting older and more frail, and the images go from very masculine to very feminine. And if you know anything about Ted Hughes as a human being, that is entirely in keeping with him as a human, and not great, but nonetheless quite interesting to look at. So just doing all those sorts of things, all the decisions that poets make without thinking, or then you think about them when you go back and edit. And it can be a really fun way of diving in. And then we just talk about what does it mean to us, and how does it speak to our own experience.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I wonder about and worry about is, we tend to read in that way kind of as poets so often, kind of like you read a great poem and the first thing you think is, oh, how did they do that so that I can like use those tools too? At least it's a tendency, I think a very human tendency. But then eventually, because so many of the readers of poetry are poets themselves, we end up reading that way maybe too much and not enjoying the pleasures of poetry. Do you find any disconnect there with the desire to break things down and see the back of the clock, and then forgetting that it's like a clock too and has a function and is beautiful on the front too? Or do you find that it's just all pleasurable on either side?
I've learned to make it pretty much all pleasurable. I mean, you always read the first time for pleasure. You don't. That always has to come first, and then you read it again for pleasure. But then it's a bit like I think knowing if you really enjoy cooking, then going out to a really good meal, because you eat it, you're getting the taste, you're enjoying the pleasure of it, but you're also then aware of some of the technique that's gone behind it. You can isolate different flavors. Or if you're a musician listening to a piece of music, you're moved by it. The words are capturing your heart, or the drums are doing something to your kidneys, or you really, really love that guitar riff. And it doesn't stop you loving it, I think, to be able to then go back if you want to and see, now why is that so good? What is it that's doing? How can I steal that and use it for myself? I don't think it has to be, if you always make yourself close read every poem, then yeah, it probably would get to be too much. But just making a point of doing it when something really catches your attention, I think is useful. It just, for me anyway, it deepens the appreciation. And I have converted some people who've come into my classes saying, oh, poetry, I'm frightened, have actually gone, oh, I get it. I'm not frightened anymore. But yeah, it can cut both ways, but it doesn't have to hurt, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Let's read another poem. Let's move on to Tumble. And the first poem you wanted to share from that book is Lucifer in Las Vegas.
Yes, my showpiece. I have read it in Christchurch, the Christchurch, so many times. I'm actually banned from reading it in public anymore. So I take every opportunity I get to read it anywhere else. It's a fairly longish piece in 6 parts. So strap in, people. Lucifer in Las Vegas. Tortoise, from the Greek Tartarachus, of the underworld. 1. The fall. As I fell, I burned through shame and grief and disbelief and love, words that trail like broken wings. Only rage was left, its silken tongue, its crystal shell. I fell through night and time into the morning of this world and kept on falling. Once I lived by passion's flame, but I learned cold blood is better. To shell. It's been 6,000 years, give or take. This shape's as good as any other. I am fortress, island, rock, a treasure chest with a living lock no thief can pick. I walk in armor, plastron thicker than a tank. The only mark of then is a reflex twitch, a flinch, a body thing I still can't shake beneath the fear of wings. When I heard what happened to Aeschylus, I laughed so hard I nearly split my shell. Well, I see he hasn't lost his sense of humor. 3. Sand. Once, all this was sand. Sand and cactus, sand and yuccas, sand and blackbrush, Gila monsters, sand and sand. Hell of a place to land in. A dried out basin in the mountains, not a blade of grass to chew on, not a flower without thorns. I listened to the blood song of the desert and dug down. 4. Vegas. I built this kingdom for myself from memories. The dry bones chatter of dice from a rattler's tail, and the girls, pink and gold like gaudy birds. The card shoe started out an empty tortoise shell. I bear no rivals. Baize-covered tables for the cropped green fuzz that gave this town its name. And the one-armed bandits, sheer genius, like teaching cows to milk themselves. The gambling chips began as scoots, then clay, then plastic. Now I use men's souls. Why not? They're plentiful and light and have no other value but my mark. We do it all. The wedding, the ensuing divorce, the post-loss suicide. If you want it, you can get it. At a price. 5. Lucifer. In the desert, the night sky was endless. In the desert, the night sky was achingly near. But now it feels empty, abandoned. Mere clouds of dust condensed into stars and space. I stopped searching its blank face for signs of forgiveness aeons ago. Look down. From the high-stakes room, the glitter of money puts starshine to shame. Look down. All the people who flock to my shepherds, who pray at my temples. Look down. I hurl a handful of orange chips into the air, watch the sheep scrabble and crawl at my feet. At night, look down from space, and Vegas is the brightest thing on this world. Look down, damn you, and see.
Yes, that was Lucifer in Vegas from Joanna Preston's book, Tumble. Really great persona poem there. And I'm wondering about your writing process and how a poem like that came to be. You mentioned poetry as music plus an interesting idea. And it feels like you can read a poem like that and say that the note at the end about Las Vegas being the lightest thing from Earth, it feels like you can almost feel the poem being generated from that thought or that idea or coming across that. So is that how the poem developed?
Came from the other end, actually. It was literally finding something about the where the word tortoise came from originally, and for some reason, of the underworld, I just thought, instead of going mafia, my brain went immediately, Lucifer, it's hell, it's the devil. And I think I must have been watching too much CSI at the time, and so it just felt right to be in Vegas, and I just had this picture in my head of this tortoise creating his own world where he could play around and do whatever he wanted. Some of it too was probably inspired by Terry Pratchett's amazing book, Small Gods, which is a critique of religion and how we stop worshipping the God and we start worshipping the religion itself, and things solidify. And I have a slightly different relationship to gambling to most people. When I was little, my father used to work on the weekends. He would be the bagman for a local bookkeeper at bush races. which was great fun. I used to, sort of 7, 8 years old, Dad would take me with him, and he'd give me 50 cents, and I could go and walk around and talk to all the trainers and the jockeys and look at the racehorses, and he would put a bet on, and if I won, that was great. I'd get the money back, and I could buy myself a bottle of soft drink, or bet again. And if I lost, that was all right. I just went back and talked to the horses afterwards. So yeah, it wasn't until very many years after, actually about the time I started writing this poem, that I realized maybe that wasn't entirely appropriate, given that Dad was also the local bank manager. But yeah, I'm Australian. We have a different attitude to gambling, I think.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So more about the writing process of this. So you found the turtle, but what is it like to how much revision goes into it? This is a poem in sections. I mean, how much time do you work on this? How do you know that it ends up in this shape? Like I'm wondering how much shaping goes into that, because you are, the sounds are so prevalent in your poetry. The music is there, but then there's so much here for shaping it into parts and pieces and deciding how to move the narrative forward. So how do you develop that from just the sound to a larger structure? What was the process like?
This one it took a long time. I spent a lot of time writing around in circles with this one. The first section came pretty quickly. I had the idea of what it would have been like to be a fallen angel, how much anger, how much resentment, and all that bitterness. And I just thought that's a really interesting thing to think about. So I think the original version of that first section I thought was going to be the whole poem, but it very much felt like it needed more. And then I wanted to change the emotional tone. I knew I didn't want it to just be one great big long blurt. As soon as it was obvious it wasn't going to be enough just to do that first section, I think I had something about opening a casino and it failing that was going to be that was the original version of it. Mm-hmm. And then it was really just trying to think about, okay, how do I tell this story? I tend to think of myself as more of a narrative poet than a lyric poet. I tend to shape things with a story, even if the story is a long way behind the poem that ends up on the page. So thinking about what would be the things, if he was telling his story, what would be the way you'd begin it? Well, obviously you start at the beginning, which is the fall. And then it was, I wanted to have the bits of the history of Las Vegas. So then I went down a lovely, lovely rabbit hole. Thank God for the internet. Mm-hmm. Did a lot of research that didn't make it into the book. And just picking out what felt right. I had a crit group I was part of who very patiently walked with me through about a year that it took to just fiddle with bits and pieces. And it really wasn't until I got to the end and I knew I wanted him to turn back up and essentially be cursing God and demanding that God look down and see what he'd done. And that's when I got that line on, oh yeah, it's finished now, I can stop. I had the Alan Parsons project, what is it? The games people play and some of the songs from the Goldbug, amazingly fun prog rock playing in the background on a loop, and I just eventually got sick of sitting with it and doing it. And it was but it took a full year to excavate and probably another 6 months to a year to finish fiddling with. Mm-hmm. Definitely not one of the ones that comes fully formed.
Yeah. Well, everybody's enjoying these poems so much. Let's hear another one. I think Fault is the next.
Yes. One of the things that happened just after the Summer King was published was Christchurch had the first of the really catastrophic earthquakes. So I was suddenly being invited to literary festivals to talk about my first book and also being asked to talk about the earthquakes. And like I think most Canterbury poets, we couldn't keep earthquakes out. So at one point I just gave up and I thought, right, just going to write a poem that is nothing but earthquake. There's no point fighting this anymore. And this is one of the ones that came out of that. Fault. A mistake, an error of judgment, a penalty brought against a quiet city. Stroll through the park, lunchtime almost over. A defect, a small disappointment. A summer day laden with clouds, grey light that softens the walls, the stone and brick, the glass. Less than expected, someone to blame. A sparrow rests lightly on the hand of a statue. A weakness in the system. Communications break down. A telephone rings into silence. A refusal, dispraise, discontinuity, lateral displacement. A woman leaves a cafe, checks both ways, crosses the street. An unthought response. A vice. Students repeating the phrases, good morning, good evening, goodbye. It is 9 o'clock. It is 10 to 11. The time is 12:51.
Yeah, and that was Fault by Joanna Preston from her book Tumble. One of the things that I really loved about reading these poems of yours is the way that you walk the line between letting us know what's going on in the poem, which is so important. You know, I mean, the number one thing on Critique of the Week on Fridays that I tell people is like, we have to know like where we are to some degree. We have to be able to touch something and like know who's speaking, have some sense of something so we can hold on to something in order to go on to the ride, you know? But then at the same time, you include a lot of mystery. Like you allow the lines, the turns to be surprising, and the places you go to be unexpected, and you don't tell the full story in a way that allows it to still be intriguing. And I think you walk that line in all the poems I've seen really well. So I wonder if you could talk about that, about finding the right balance between mystery and transparency.
I once got told by an editor that I am relentlessly linear. And I have to always consciously try and not just go straight from A to Z. So I've spent a lot of time I particularly get interested in poets who do that wandering around really well. With that particular poem, with Fault, it was just looking at a whole lot of definitions of the word fault, a whole lot of ways that the word gets used. It's actually a strategy I used in a lot of poems. It can be a really interesting way of coming sideways at a question or at an idea. Part of it then becomes just things like don't tell me, show me. Another New Zealand poet has a great way of describing that, which is don't tell me about the grief, show me the funeral. So I try and make sure I'm always doing that. I will sometimes sit down and pull apart when I've got a first draft. I will go back and I say, okay, where can I break this? Where can I stop this from taking people where they expect to go? I'm not always about throwing in a change or a surprise, but it's about bringing in something mysterious. I trust myself now more to just write and not worry too much about where I'm going. Usually if the poem ends up where I expected it to end up, then I've done something wrong. Or sometimes it just means that I've got the beginning in the wrong place and the end in the wrong place, and I need to change them around. I try to be fairly brave about doing that. I'm not as brave as I would like to be, but I will quite often pull a poem apart and throw away the first line and throw away the last line and then see how much bleeding happens. And that I find that useful. But things like taking a metaphor and really following it and going in interesting places with it. I find that can be a really useful way of writing. And again, part of it is from teaching creative writing and trying to explain to people, well, this is what would work really well. So techniques like expanding parts, don't just keep all of your proportions equal, varying the length of your sentences, varying the length of your lines, and always trying to find the interesting thing that you don't expect and following that. Mm-hmm. I go down a lot of rabbit holes. It's why I write on a geological timescale, more or less. It was 12 years between my first book and my second book. And I do a lot of writing around, and I do a lot of researching, and I do a lot of just walking up and down and swearing at my book and saying, no, come on, poem, come, play with me, please. Yeah. And I read a lot. I read a lot of other poets when I'm writing and try to let their voices sort of come over my shoulder and prod me in ways I didn't expect to go.
And how is there any trick that you found to letting yourself be surprised by where you go? By not being so sort of doggedly pursuing what you think you're pursuing. I think that's so often that's the trick, is to not be so focused on the target, but yourself in the process or something. Is there a way, and even as simple as like ritualizing the writing process or things like that? Like, is there anything you do to help creativity flow out instead of just what you expect?
Music.
Ah.
Music. I almost always have a theme song for the poem, and I just put it on loop. I put in my noise cancelling headphones, and I try and make sure that the rest of the world doesn't exist, and I just keep going until I get in there somewhere. I used to use aromatherapy oils just because I found, again, a smell would be a really great way of cueing me back into the emotion. I don't do that so much since the earthquakes, because the idea of having a candle burning anywhere is a little bit terrifying to me. But music is a big thing. And then it's just play and don't get up until something has come that's interesting. And I don't throw anything away. I never throw away any of my old drafts. I have sitting up just on the corner, I have a box file, really old box file I wrapped in gold paper, and it is called My Repository of Culled Genius. It's a tip that I got from a early mentor. And it's where anytime I've got a line or a phrase that doesn't fit in a poem, but that I really don't want to get rid of, I take it out, I write it very nicely on the piece of paper, and I put it in this beautiful box. And then I make a point of bringing those sorts of things out when I get stuck. Actually, it's really, really useful, because particularly if you've forgotten about the line and where it came from, it can be a great way of getting you started. But as far as how do I make sure that I follow the rabbit trails, really it is just getting into that flow. I will do yoga. I will do meditation. I will sit down with a beer, or I will sit down with my 4th cup of coffee for the day. Or I will dance around the room when no one can see me, or I hope no one can see me. And it's just, it's practice. It really is practice. It doesn't always come, and it doesn't always work. And that's, again, why it's 12 years between books sometimes. But it's always worth trying. To be honest, I actually find the ekphrastic challenges have been amazingly good at sparking me in unusual directions. I usually have about 4 different poem starts before one actually works for me. So things like that, random chance, grab a line from someone else's book and tell yourself you're going to have to include that somewhere. I give myself a lot of writing challenges. I find that really, really useful, especially when I don't want to do them. Finding ways of following the rules without following the rules is a really, really good creative technique, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you mentioned play, and it's some of it is about play, but then that you have to practice playing in order to be able to play as an adult, I think maybe is a big part of the problem. Yeah. Kids have no trouble with it, but adults, we have to sort of remind ourselves how to play, because there's so much adult stuff going on so often. You mentioned the ekphrastic challenge, and you've won that twice for years apart, very different poems. It was really interesting to see. I kind of forgotten that it was 2, and so do you often write to prompts? I know you say the ekphrastic challenges frequently, but do you write to ekphrastic poems generally? Is that something that you use to spark yourself outside of it, or is that just a phase? Ekphrastic challenge itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things I do when I'm writing is, as well as music, I will also get images, bits of research. I have a process journal. I have an enormous stack of process journals where just anything that comes up, I'll stick in it. Pinterest can be very useful for getting you weird, gloomy, sort of mythological pictures, particularly. Or I go looking on museum websites and try and see something that sparks me. I find that really useful. So I quite often, as long as the music, the scent, the vague idea, I'll have other pictures around me that work. I have a friend who is an artist who always has a mood board, and hers is huge. So mine's usually just tiny and pasted into my book, and then sitting on a music stand and wobbling badly as I'm writing. I think anything that feels like it applies, I will try and gather and put around me. It sort of gets a little bit like a magic circle after a while. I'm not going to criticize it if that works sometimes. I'm happy to go with it. I think you have to find it for yourself, what works and what doesn't. But yes, I use a lot of prompts. I have so many writing books with prompts, and I go back to them again and again and again and again.
Yeah, well, I think that's great advice too. Let's hear another poem. Galanthus in Rain.
Yeah, this one's the first decima. This is the OG of decimas, and it literally just started by looking out the window and writing about what I saw. But I'd been reading. I can't remember now the exact poem. I think it's in the issue of Rattle. I'd given myself the challenge of 10-syllable lines, 10 lines, and all turning on one rhyme. But sort of a mixture of slant and full rhyme, which was fun. And sometimes you can just come up with a list of words that all share the same sort of sound, and then a poem comes out of them. And that's more or less what happened with this one. Galanthus in Rain. Soft rain bends the necks of winter flowers. Penitents in white veils and green blouses, meek beneath the copper beech that towers like a magistrate. And all my powers of persuasion cannot alter how this grim gallows verdict falls. You are now hers, shapeless as salt water, 30 hours since you left. Who knew we were such cowards? Good wine set aside until it sours. The house fills with rain, and I allow this.
Yeah, that was Galanthus in Rain from Tumble, and that was a decima, the first ever of that form. And the form featured in a poem in the summer issue of Rattle. And you do move frequently from free verse to specifically metered forms, and a lot of different. And I assume it's part of the challenge that you set for yourself. How much, like when do you know that a poem is going to be in the certain form that it is? Is it sort of a, we talk about that idea that generates the poem. Is it fitting that to a form, or is it like the process of playing and, listening to that song and staring at yourself and, waiting for it to blossom, where finally the form emerges? Or, how do you know the shape it's going to become?
All of the above, and twice on Sundays. I generally only know the form that it needs to be about 5 minutes after I've submitted it somewhere, and then you go, oh no. Jokes aside, no, it's an emergent thing. I think sometimes I start with the form, and that shapes where things go. Other times, another brilliant bit of advice I got given by the British poet Sheena Pugh was, if you can't make it behave itself, pour it into a sonnet. I adore sonnets. I adore formal poems, but the sonnet is the queen. It's that shape. It's not just the length. And I don't worry too much about the rhyme pattern. If it fits, it fits. That's great. But otherwise, it's that. A sonnet is a muscle. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of investigating the world. And it's an incredibly valuable way of making you find out what you do and don't need in a poem, even if it doesn't end up being a sonnet in the end. So sometimes I will start with the form, and so Villanelle is always going to be about obsession, about loss or memory, or that sense of I can't quite let it go. I've got to come back and back and back. Again, and haiku is something I was obsessed with for a very, very long time. And so haiku and haibun, I'm always writing. When I'm writing those, it's always about that sense of leaping from one thing to another thing to another thing, and don't explain anything, leave it all for the reader to do. Sometimes it's a case of starting with the form, and then the work fits with those particular needs or that way of unfolding. Other times it's that you don't know it until the poem's about halfway through, and you think, oh, you're starting to feel to me like a pantoum. I think I'm going to have to go to that. Or this, why is this not behaving? Why can't I get this to settle? Why can't I make it settle? And sometimes giving yourself the structure of a form is a wonderful way of, I think it frees up that part of your brain that knows more than you do, that doesn't get to talk most of the time. You give the sort of the chattery monkey brain something like a set of rules to follow, and that keeps it occupied, and then the creative bit can get to work and do the actual grit. So it's a bit of both, but I adore formal poetry. I think it's the most important underpinning of all of it, having some awareness of it, because it's such a rich background. It's not just rhyme and rhythm. It's thought, it's muscle, it's a whole ethos of how things unfold. And because I studied for 3 years at the University of Glamorgan in Wales, oh Lord, you get exposed to Welsh poetry and just how inherently musical it is. It can't help rub off on you, I think. And that was amazing fun to be a part of. Although Welsh people kept kindly telling me that no, I was doing it all wrong when I attempted Welsh forms. So that's all right. I'm doing my best.
Yeah. Do you find that Do you think you would be able to write in the same voice for free verse poems as you do if you didn't have the meter behind them? Because so often, I think it was Boris Dralyuk maybe who pointed out, or maybe it was on the Poetry Space and not a Rattlecast, but that so many poems he loves that are free verse end up having like an iambic pentameter first line, you know? And then I started noticing that too once he said it, and you do see that so frequently. It's like the meter starts out, and I just wonder how much, even though how much of your verse becomes, I guess, actual free verse, like verse in the way that there's a meter hidden underneath the surface when you have real experience in form that is strict and regular.
I think there's always the ghost of it behind. Iambic pentameter is just the neutral default for English. The way that the 17 onji is for Japanese, so it's hard to get away from that. I don't know. I think I do write quite a bit of free verse, partly because it's easier and harder simultaneously. It's almost always got a bit of a beat behind it, and there's almost always bits of rhythm. I love doing things like having a phrase echoed rhythmically later on in the poem, or using things like sound and assonance, particularly assonance and consonants are really underrated. I think using that to pick up an important sound and keeping it going. But I suppose that's still free verse if the pattern doesn't exist until it happens and you can't predict it from line to line. I don't know. Maybe no verse is truly free if it's any good. This is a long way of saying I don't know.
Yeah. I want to make sure we get to more poems. Let's do the next one up. And this is a newer one, poem with guest house in view.
Oh, yes. I write a lot of depressing and violent and gloomy poems, but I do occasionally write silly ones. And this one was just based in an actual experience. And it ends with a reference to a joke punchline, which some people will get and some people will not. Those of you who don't get it, go and ask a friend. Poem with guest house and view. I stayed one night in a Portobello guest house where the stairs were hard, but the bed was soft. A part of town ringed with red post boxes and tickled by the wind off the Firth of Forth. In the morning, I watched the sun rise vein by vein through the leaves of a bunch of ruby red chard arranged in a vase on the windowsill. Beautiful. The delta of red and the delicate green and the sun in flood across the sheets. Last night I'd watched it set between the legs of a man jogging in a kilt along the beach, his footprints blushing in the wet sand behind him, fading as they filled with salt water, erased by a tide in perfect working order.
Yes, that's a newer poem.
All true, too.
With guest house view. Yeah, I should say, if you're enjoying this conversation, please do click the like button. As always, there are like twice as many people watching as have clicked like so far, and that one little gesture with your finger can help poetry spread around to more people, so click that right now. And if you have any questions for Joanna, please leave them in the chat window, especially on YouTube. That's the one I pay the most attention to. It helps if you put question all in all caps so that I can see it. But let's see. Why don't we do? I want to do other poems. Let's do another poem. Let's do lines composed some years after freezing my backside off at Tintern Abbey.
Oh yeah, I've had variations of the title. The word backside is the expurgate, the slightly politer version of what it has on occasion been. But yeah, and again another true story. But lines composed some years after freezing my backside off at Tintern Abbey. For Peter. Surely you walked with me across the plank bridge, over the excavation ditch, and into the word-made stone, the walls hewn from poetry. I've never been so cold. Panes of ice fused together where I stand. Scaffolding clings in place of ivy to the walls. Hoarfrost has crystallized the tree. Every branch an ache, each twig encased in glass and light. But in the ruins of the church, there is no snow. Grass as green as Ireland grows lush where the altar once stood. Leaning into the socket of the great east window, I try to remember the words, but my head fills with the wind and the weight of the clouds. a chill like grief seeping through my shoes. And although I didn't know it then, you were already 6 months dead, and all my words worth nothing.
Well, very moving poem there. That was lines composed some years after freezing my backside off at Tintern Abbey by Joanna Preston. One of the things people have been talking about a lot in the chat is your reading voice. And, everybody loves the accent, of course, in the U.S. We love the sound of that. But also the pacing is so important, too. And there's a way that I think somebody said, I can't remember how they phrased it, but it's very meditative or, like you're drawn in by the cadence and the sort of, I don't know, the calm of it, too. And then that poem... A fault about the earthquake, there are those pauses toward the end that you really give space to as you're reading, and it wouldn't work the same way if you didn't allow that silence to enter between those words. So I was wondering how you think about poems and performing them as opposed to just having them on the page. Are you enacting it as it is in your head, or are you thinking about how it's received? And is there any advice you can give to making poems come to life when all you can do is hear them, which so many people will be listening and not watching and enjoying the poems that way? Do you have any advice for performing your poems?
Advice for performing the poems? Slowing down. I tend to speak very quickly, so I always try and mentally slow myself when I'm reading. Actually, a trick that I got taught many years ago is it can be useful when you're preparing for a reading to get pieces of music. And I find a really useful one is Robert Plant doing Morning Dew. It's just a beautiful rhythm, and it's slow and it's meditative, and you get that rhythm in your head. It's very easy it helps you slow down and take time. Paying attention to line breaks. I'm infamous for my obsession with line breaks, so I try and pay attention to where they fall, what they're doing, and how because the ebb and flow across the line breaks is what gives poems their energy. Thinking about what you're reading, but not too deeply. You can always get caught on if it's a moving poem, doesn't matter if it was written by you or written by somebody else, you can easily get caught up on that, and then you just sort of lose yourself and your voice trails off. So there's an element of performance. I try and keep things rhythmical, but not too predictably rhythmical. You don't want it to turn into just plonk, 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 plonk. Thinking about the poem, loving the poem, that helps. It really does. If it's a piece that you don't like, it's harder to read. Just taking your time and loving the words and feeling them in your mouth, feeling them on your tongue. We spend our entire lives teaching our tongues and our ears how to enjoy language. So enjoy it. Don't rush. There is no fire. You do not have to be over quickly. They very rarely stop you with 10 seconds over. So just take your time and read it. Read it with love. Read it with love.
Yeah, I think that's the best advice. And it reminds me, at our editorial meetings sometimes when we're debating on a poem, over the years, and I don't think I've ever shared this fact, but it's true. Alan, if we're trying to decide on a poem, we'll read a poem out loud. And if he's on the side of let's not publish this, I'm just like, Alan, if you don't like it, you're not going to read it well. You have to have someone else read it. So let me, and so we go through that. But if you love a poem, you can sort of, if you love something that you're reading, you can read like a grocery list in a way that's engaging, and if you can read a great poem in a way that when you're not engaged and aren't in love with it, that you just ruin it. And so much.
You can do so much damage if you want to. You can completely wreck a poem if you want to read it badly. Mm-hmm. And a lot of poets aren't good at reading their own work. It can be really, really tragic to hear someone whose work you adore on the page, and then they get up and they just read it as though they're a robot that's running its battery down and about to needs a desperate reboot. Mm-hmm. It's
love and confidence.
I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you mentioned line breaks, and I'm wondering how you think about them. The advice, usually the general advice is to end on a strong word and not an article. And that's sort of the basic workshop advice. But beyond that, how do you think about line breaks? Like just as far as how long the line should be and on a deeper level than just that?
This is where you tap into a very dangerous area because I am obsessed. I got again, this is going back to when I was studying in Wales. I got given the challenge by one of the tutors there, with what became the manuscript of the Summer King, to justify every line break, as in every single line break in every single poem. And that taught me so much. His thing was, a line break should be a little dramatic moment. It doesn't have to be a big drama. It's not a sort of massive cliffhanger, but every time you get to the end of a line, it's a place where the reader can lose interest and walk away. There's this little extra boost of energy that they need to keep going.
Oh,
so
interesting.
you think about what the lines are doing. Is there a reason to keep going, or am I just giving you a reason to hop off? So strong enjambment is great for giving energy, because you've got that, I don't understand, I need to keep reading to understand what the heck you're saying. But if you do that too much, lots of enjambment, lots of harsh enjambment becomes so off-putting, because it's making your reader work really, 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 really hard. But you go to the opposite extreme, you go to something that's very end-stopped. I mean, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening is the classic example. It's such a monotonous poem, but it's intentional monotony. It's about slowing, about stopping, about rest. But I mean, line breaks can do so much. You can use them to speed things up. You can use them to slow things down. You can use them to hide stuff. If you don't want a rhyme to be obvious, you stick it in the middle of the line. People don't notice it. You hear it, but you don't notice it. To pick out words that are important. You always want to have those ideally on the end of lines, because of course that's what we remember. You hold it in your brain while your eye tracks down to the next bit. Things about whether you want to let people know something quickly or slowly. You can use your line breaks to make things easy to understand. With a great image or a complicated concept, you want to give that a line, and then give your reader a wee break so that they can process it before you move on to the next bit. I do literally go on for 9 hours. I have a 9-hour masterclass I run about line breaks occasionally.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I'm going to be doing it at the Right Word Festival soon.
Yeah, I had the image while you were talking about that, about having it, a little boost of interest at the end. Of like, a poem is kind of like a balloon, that game where you like hit a balloon and try to keep it in the air as long as you can. It's like it's falling, pop, and you got to keep it up, keep it going. And that kind of is how the line breaks function. Some poems that need faster ones, and sometimes need slower ones. And yeah, that's really interesting. Well, a lot of people are asking.
Challenges
No.
Just a really good challenge for you one day is to take Allen Ginsberg's Howl and break it into short lines and see what it does, and it becomes insane. Clinically insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's great fun to do.
Yeah. I was gonna say there are a lot of people that ask questions here, and they're getting to all caps the whole sentences now, so we better get to some. So MSMWB1 asks, sort of along the line of line breaks, do you have any suggestions for how to end a poem?
That's always a tough one. Try not to overdo the twist and the turn punchline ending. Again, this is a thing that's been coming up a lot with some of my students. You'll find some poets who it's almost always a punchline. And so you read the poem and you get to the end and it doesn't matter what's come before. What you think you understand is not what the poem's about. So that can get a bit predictable. Mix them up. Don't be afraid to go for, if you know the difference between an Eastern, and I think they call it an Eastern and a Western ending, or an open and a closed ending. One of the reasons that haiku is so valuable to read and really think about, even if you're a poet who has no interest in writing it, is because haiku has to be open. You can't close things off. It was always intended as the first verse of a much longer linked poem. So it has that sense of this could go anywhere. And it's really useful to be able to keep a poem going that way. Superb example is Shelley's Ozymandias, where he doesn't end on the inscription, look upon my works, ye man, and despair, and everything is over. That would be the punchline end. But in fact, he moves us beyond that and takes us over that vista, then looking out over the sands, and you sort of get this sense of the life streaming away. Vary it. See if the poem might work better if you take that extra couple of lines and move beyond the ending. Another one that's a good challenge is cut the ending off. See how much you can chop off the end, because so often we go beyond where we need to go. Mm-hmm. And actually you'll find that the best last line of the poem was, a stanza earlier or 2 stanzas earlier. It's painful. It is painful to chop things off your work, but it can be a great little challenge. So yeah, start just pruning it back, see where it goes.
Yeah, it's true. The number one revision we do for poems we publish is to, well, it's hard to say because it's either chop off the first stanza or the last stanza. And sometimes people need a little ramp to get there and they didn't need it, and sometimes they need to explain it when they didn't need to. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's see. So 2 quick questions, and we'll do one last poem. So lightning round. But Winfield Taylor wants to know: is the sparrow in Fault somehow related to Scott or to Victoria? I'm just wondering if either of those are particular connections to Christchurch.
No, in this case, the sparrow was a literal image from the poem. It's all set in the moments before the second earthquake, before the February one, which is the one that really was catastrophic for the city. And it is quite literally, I had been in the city, I think a couple of days before, and we were all feeling, we were feeling so relieved because we thought the September earthquake was the one that had, let off all of the stored up energy in the faults. And we thought, great, we're fine now. We've just got to rebuild. That's okay. And no one had died in the first earthquake. Mm-hmm. It hit at 4:00 in the morning, but no one had died. And that was such an enormous relief to everyone. And then, and so we were all sort of walking around going, wow, we made it, fabulous. And there are statues of various notaries in Cathedral Square. And very famously, there was a photograph in the newspapers, I think a couple of days after, of one of the statues, and it had toppled over on its face. And I could remember walking in the square and literally a sparrow on the hand of on one of the outstretched hands of the statue. A lot of the imagery in that poem is just little snapshots of memories of being in the city and mixed up with things. But there's also meant to be a little hint of watching every sparrow fall, and that idea. Yeah. Sorry, quick fire question, long-winded answer.
Well, let's try one more. Zachary Honeycutt wants to know, which poets inspire you?
Oh Lord, so many. I got given a copy of Ted Hughes's Lupercal when I was very young. I think about 8 or 9. I'm not sure now, looking back on it, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. And I adored Seamus Heaney. I got to hear him read in London not long before he died, which was wonderful. A poet that you may not have come across that I think everyone should keep an eye out for, who's a New Zealander, is Rebecca Hawkes. She's amazing. Very, 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 very sharp, very intelligent. She writes very sexy poems, but very thoughtful poems, just really good. An American poet who I adored, actually 2, Kimiko Hahn. I love the way that she mixes so many different genres. I love the way her brain works. And Paisley Rechdale is another one who I adore. And I've just started getting into Rebecca Hazelton. I've started getting a lot of her books. I'm a book fiend. I have a lot of books, and I collect them and I borrow them, and I don't always give them back when I borrow them. I'm bad.
Well, that's a warning. Fair warning. Well, thanks. Some great suggestions there, and some poets that I hadn't heard of. I'll have to check out myself. Let's see. So let's close out with one last poem, and the last one we have is Diptych for the Canterbury Nobbled Weevil.
I wanted to finish with something a little bit later. This was a couple of years ago. It was a commission for a festschrift, and a whole lot of different poets were each given a different endangered animal or endangered New Zealand creature. We didn't have any choice about what we were given. We were just given them. And New Zealand has a really good history of bringing creatures back from the brink of extinction. Fingers crossed for what's going on with bird flu at the moment. We have several of the world's rarest birds, so that's a bit scary. But the Nobbled Weevil's an interesting one. It was endemic to the area of the South Island that I'm in Canterbury, but was thought to go extinct in 1922. And then it was rediscovered completely by chance in 2004 on one patch of a particular plant. I think it's called Golden Spaniard, in one area of the South Island. And it's one of those things you just think, my Lord, how did it survive? How did we miss it? Are there more? Oh, please don't let there be a fire go through that area in the near future. So yeah, reading about it and looking at pictures of it, I sort of became a bit obsessed and couldn't quite do it in one poem, so it's turned into a diptych, so it's two. Diptych for the Canterbury Nobbled Weevil, Candramphus tuberculatus. 1. Portrait of the Canterbury Nobbled Weevil as Hercule Poirot. It is true, mon ami, that I have fallen for a golden Spaniard. It is the fate of small, precise men to hanker always after large, flamboyant women. And she is magnificent, n'est-ce pas? From her flaxen crown and the jewel-pointed pins in her hair to her sharp tongue and her needle-quick wit, there is goodness at the core of her, at heart, and it is not polite that you should say I am too old. After years of being Hercule Poirot, scourge of thieves, bane of forgers and soap manufacturers from Liege, I took my little grey self to consider the marrow of matters. Still luxuriant, my moustaches are now genticulate antennae. I preen, I twirl them, I make my brief toilette, and it is not civil of you to poke the fun at my nose. 1,000 pardons. Why was I secluded from the world for 80 years? I found myself again upon the trail of thieves, sheep thieves no less, but mon Dieu, the dust, the heat, my patent leather shoes distressed, my grey silk suit a tattered wreck, and no valet to clean my sleeves of lint. I pine, I droop, I despair. Then, as from nowhere, her voice, her poise, her grace, Senora Acephila. Like a storm of fire, she swept me to her chalet, kept me nestled in the mountain's ample lap. It is not kind to mention Countess Vera Rosikoff. 2. Decima for the Canterbury Nobbled Weevil. Just the size of a sunflower seed, all warty and nobbled, a long-nosed beetle, armoured like some kind of medieval knight's horse, ready to charge at a windmill. But you are ancient, doughty retrieval of time before Moa, before Haast's eagle, before the reign of rodents and people, revenant of tussock, nocturnal beetle, grey Quasimodo of speargrass steeples, stray collar button, lost and found weevil.
Well, very cool to end on that, Decima. And that was, once again, diptych for the Canterbury Nobbled Weevil.
Nobbled Weevil.
Yeah, very fun poem, fun topic too. Joanna, thanks so much. It's been such a pleasure talking to you about poetry, diving into things deeply, and sharing your wonderful work. It's been a real honor to have you on. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes, that was Joanna Preston. You can find all of Joanna's books at joannapreston.com. That's JoannaPreston.com. Find her books, The Summer King, Tumble there. Keep an eye out for the new one. We looked at a little bit from the forthcoming manuscript as well, so do check all those out. I'm going to take a quick break and go to our invited prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to pick a time in your life that was particularly impacted by weather and make us feel it right alongside you. So how it works, if you submitted by Sunday night last night at midnight, you may have gotten an invitation in your email. We have a great lineup of poets coming, so sit tight and we'll be right back with a whole lot more poetry. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. I'm here with our creative editor, our prompts poems editor, and my wife, Katie Dozier. How you doing, Katie?
I'm doing great. I love that conversation so much. I have to say, I don't know if I've ever agreed with a Rattlecast guest more than I just agreed with Joanna. She was saying so many things where it was like, oh, yes, I've thought about it that way before, but not as the brilliant metaphor you just used or something. Like, it was great.
Yeah, it is very reinforcing and edifying at the same time. For sure.
And then always it's funny because when I know I'm gonna like share the poem next, when it's someone who I really love listening to, suddenly I feel nervous all of a sudden when they've just been reading in her beautiful voice. So
yeah, I do. I know I read poems fast.
I know. I was thinking when she was saying that, like, Tim, maybe, but I love the way you read.
That's how it goes in my head. I can't help it.
But I loved her point, too, about how there's like a level of connection that's not just throwing yourself completely into the poem.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a
like,
great point, too.
Good point. Yeah. All right.
Well, the prompt for this week was to pick a time in your life that was particularly impacted by the weather and make us feel it right alongside you. Okay.
All right. And mine is not a hyphen. I feel like I always have to say that because people are probably expecting the haiku with it unless I say it. But all right. Okay. Re-evacuation. Now the names of hurricanes escape me like old boyfriends, except for Irma. I still hear the tone-deaf clang of metal shutters as we yank them off the stack in the garage. And when I hoisted the bucket of bolts, it jingled like a ghost's chains. And the empty shelves at Publix, the water bottles fled first. Then the eggs cracked off, the milk, the bread. All the vacancies of the store began to forecast death. Nearly every hurricane, I argued to let us leave before the other cars could clog up the lone highway. But the spaghetti-mottled truth is this. We were the happiest in our fleeing of it. How the hurricane proved bigger circles exist. Our marriage just a dot underneath. An unmappable blip. He drove us to Savannah. We three sat on Forrest Gump's bench until the Spanish moss jumped off the oaks to swirl around us yet again.
Yeah, well, I love that. So many great lines, especially spaghetti modeled truth. Isn't that the way it is?
I was wondering if I could get away with that. I was pretty happy when I came up with it. It's like that. I don't know how much it takes. Like I looked at so many spaghetti models, you know, living in Florida. And you guys want to know what's super weird about this? So I wrote this poem, got on Facebook, and the first thing I see on Facebook, I understand the algo showing it to me, but still was that there's a tropical storm like headed to us, which I had no idea of when I wrote this poem. So it's kind of weird.
Yep, we got the water.
So we bought the water. Yeah, we did buy the water.
Well, it's new to me. At some point, we'll probably get my first hurricane because I've never been. I've got the blizzards, got the earthquakes.
It's going to be nothing like a
got
South
the forest
Florida
fires,
hurricane, I'll tell
got
you
the
that
floods,
much.
but no hurricane ever. Yeah,
well, don't tempt fate.
Yeah, that's not. All right.
Well, what do you have?
Okay, so my poem, I went to the literary verse book I'm working on, and this one is called Forecast. Here's why we wait for inclement weather. The flash floods or frozen pipes bursting in the basement. Barometric pressure drops like a dorsal fin. The season's drought extends beyond expectation as extra locusts insatiably swarm. See the silt on the floor from the river's rapid rise, a coarse clay the color of rust. It makes a map of all your movements, every footfall fixed in a fragile filigree as you awkwardly access our aisles. Outside, the scaffolding is succumbing to snow. You open the exit, which is also the entrance, excuse yourself to leave. But layers of latticed ice, compressed and compacted in the cold, only reveal the knob's ragged relief. The cafes are closed to keep you out. We're closed to confine, caging you in. There you go.
I love the latticed ice.
Well, thank you.
It's a very beautiful image.
A little bit. Thinking about the 7-foot storm we had there up in the mountains.
Those were definitely the two most popular things were, you know, a large amount of snow. And then, of course, I mean, with the Poets Respond poem, too, that the wildfire is so much in everyone's mind, too, right now.
Yeah, definitely. The smoke is everywhere but here, it feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see what our favorite community host, Dick Westheimer, has in store for us. Hey, Dick, how you doing?
It looks like he's calling in live from the World Cup. Is this accurate?
I didn't think you'd notice.
I always noticed.
With that background. We are huge España fans in our family.
Oh, wonderful.
My son lived there for 2 years. We have a Spanish son who lived with us for 2 years. So we were all on a massive group chat yesterday, just absolutely enjoying our best lives.
Well, that's great.
That definitely
is
is
really
yeah.
fun.
It's one thing I wished I was watching it, even though we're not. We don't really have a way to watch it, I guess, is part of the reason, or time. Besides for those two problems.
But we're happy
It sounds
everyone's
fun.
happy.
We definitely are, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Dick, I don't know if it's possible to turn your mic up, but it's pretty quiet.
Is that better?
That's better, yeah. Okay.
Maybe his voice
Okay.
is hoarse from cheering.
Maybe.
Yeah, it could be. Cheering or, like holding our breath or whatever it was. Well, to my duties, Sunday is our community reading. And Katie and I have been in touch with Chelsea about a couple of ideas of how to make the reading easier for Chelsea, and also get out before 9:30. We had a lot of readers last time, which I'm so excited about. We also had a lot of folks who were just hanging out. So a couple of things I want to ask folks, and we'll try to communicate this during the week, is they make sure if they're going to send their poem to Chelsea, the sooner she gets it, the better, as an attachment in an email, not in the body of an email. And that will help her with her job. And if she gets them beforehand, and we'll post the email address, that will make it great. And so that's one thing. The second is I'm going to try. I am socially inept, so I don't think I'll do this as well as Tim and Katie might do it, to have the first-time readers actually go first to make sure that we get them heard. My goal will be to get everyone heard and responded to and loved and enjoyed, because I just love the poem so much, as do my community hosts. But it might be that we run out and run out of time, because I do want to make sure that my community host gets the time to read her own poem into the space at the end without feeling rushed. So we got 37 folks who read last time. That was a record. We might not be able to fit that many in, but we'll see. We'll try. And also, Zach, I promise, Zach's here in the Zoom, that I will not go in alphabetical order by last name
By first.
again and have you go last. I'll try to figure that out. So.
Well, it could be a good time for people to write some haiku. You can always do a haiku to the prompt.
Yeah,
That's true. We still get so little haiku. It's true.
And we had time. This past time we had time. It's just, I just love it. People are showing up. People are showing up to listen. People who showed up to listen have decided to read because they hear other folks' poems and feel so welcome.
Great.
And that's the goal.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's great.
Yeah. And it'll be our first two-time host, Lexi Pell, will be back as the creator of our format. And I'm very excited to see how it works out. But send your poems as an attachment to the community, and we'll post it on the Facebook group. And maybe, Katie, you can send it out in your email.
Sure, yeah. And to remind everybody, the Facebook group we're talking about is Rattlecast Prompts. If you apply for membership and answer the 2 questions, I have a good feeling you'll be accepted.
Yes. And if you don't answer the 2 questions,
I have a feeling you will not be accepted because we are not having bots in our group. We're way too cool for that.
Yeah. And not only that, we like, as one of the moderators of the group, I love reading why people want to read prompt, prompt poems and stuff.
Oh, I do too. I read every time it's me accepting. I really like, and it's valuable to me to see why people are choosing to write prompt poems, why they're one of our friends, basically.
And we'll have the graphics up there sometime this week, I bet.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So I will go ahead and read my poem, which I got terrific help on the prompt page. I really appreciate it. It was mostly little fine points this time, but they were very helpful. It's great. The gift of good and silent. That day in January of 77, when the temp dropped to 25 below, I went outside in my red down parka and peed in the snow. I like to tell people my stream froze in a yellow arc before it hit the ground, but all I recall was how still I stood. I tossed back my hood and listened for the first time. I heard nothing and knew the world as a spun-down clock, and even the stars stopped whispering. Near absolute zero, atoms slow and cease vibrating, and 23-year-old men for one moment stop thinking about the future, stop longing for a woman to warm, and become quiet as ice before it cracks. And then they go inside, load the wood stove, and snug into bed alone, not yet knowing that they will grow old, holding a woman yet unknown, every night for 50 years, until one of them grows as still as that night in 77, and the other remembers how quiet can be, eating dinner alone, when even the forks and knives silence their clinking, and the dishwater in the sink shushes itself out of respect for the dead, and the remaining lover tries to make a dignity of loving the quiet again.
That's a very nice turn you had midway through. I love the midway turn, you don't see it coming. So thanks, Dick.
Well, and again, the pleasure of writing poems to prompts or anything is like the pleasure of making something out of nothing. Like,
very much.
Where do these things come from?
Yeah.
And it's the one of my favorite poetry journals has a mission of promoting the practice of poetry. I won't tell you which one starts with an R and rhymes with battle, but it's the practice, and it's the practice of which results in this discovery. So I appreciate y'all.
Thanks very much, Dick.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dick. We definitely appreciate you. Thanks for sharing
Thanks.
that.
Bye.
Yeah, it was Dick Westheimer with The Gift of Good and Silent. Next, let's go to Michelle Rosario. And Michelle's got a poem in the forthcoming issue of Rattle, the tribute to the future.
Yeah, she does. It's a good one. Everybody's going to really enjoy getting to see it, I'm sure.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's so funny because this is the second time I get invited with a poem that when I click submit, I was like, oh no, what if I have to actually read it? And I'm like, I did this to myself, so I don't know why. I don't know why I feel like that. But I really enjoy this prompt. I'm from Puerto Rico, but I was like, nah, I'm not going to talk about hurricanes because that's too easy. And I apologize if my voice is crackling a little bit because I was watching the game and I got too excited. And my voice and my liver, they pay the price. So,
that's great.
So my poem is called Icecapade. A snowstorm hit town the night before. It was Valentine's Day, but I was scheduled to work. Bundle up, we gathered our tools and made our descent from the third floor of the apartment building and into the outdoor parking lot. The beat up Honda was frozen in place, and we were still trying to acclimate to this phenomenon called winter, which was so foreign to us. I called my boss since I was already late, and he told me to arrive when I could. You read my eyes, even as they were almost non-existent between the beanie and the scarf. Leaving everything behind, we held hands and created a skating rink for us. I was needed at work, but we needed this more. I must have been freezing, but your hand, wrapped in fake wool, gave me the warmth of 1,000 suns. We had no idea how we will get the car out, how I will make it to work, how long this fairy tale would last. But we decided to take a chance, and we freeze frame what falling in love is all about. Two icicles falling in love.
Aw. Well, Michelle, I love this haiku. I read it and I was like, oh, that's so sweet. Like, it's just the sweetest
I was so
thing.
excited. I wrote a hype on it, and I'm like, who am I? Like, I usually don't do this.
That's great. You know, it's funny because I made a post on my own Facebook page yesterday or something asking people like which are like lines that they have that pop into their head from other poems. And I know, should we be lucky enough to have two icicles in Texas this winter, I will think of this wonderful, charming haiku. I really enjoy it. So thanks so much and nice to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Michelle. Yeah, it was Michelle Rosario with Icecapade. Next, let's go to Lisa Seidenberg.
Hi.
Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi. I was really pleased that you chose my poem this week. I figured there'd be a lot of weather poems because everybody has a weather story, and I did something for me that was very different. My experience that you'll hear about was kind of disorienting, so I wanted the poem to be disorienting in the way I laid it out on the page and so on. So without giving it away, I guess I should read the poem.
Great.
It's called Caught in a Whiteout. A January drive on a country road, wipers beat in frantic sweeps against the onslaught of snow squalls. Suddenly the air feels different, an eerie hush. A heavy cloak of white descends. There's no backwards or forwards. Ramparts of ice line the roadside, offering no escape. Past and future erase, it's a space of elongated time, like the dolly clocks melting over a disembodied table. Still a teen, I have scant experience of mortal fear, except that incident in summer camp, shoved by surprise into the lake, felt like drowning in a vat of black bubbles. This time I am submerged in whiteness, velvety as a baby's blanket, as silent as Elysium. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, I really, exactly what you're saying at the start, I think you did such an effective job of, it really allowed us, the form flowing across the page, really allowed us to feel in the moment with you. And it's so nice when that comes out as thoughtful and really brings us into it. I think as poets, sometimes we can, sometimes there could be like this sort of thing where like we see it somewhere, we just do it and it doesn't actually make any sense. But here it really fits and really allowed us to enter the poem more. So thank you.
Oh, appreciate you saying that. I was afraid my leaps were a little too leaping. But,
I'm here for a leap. Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. It was Lisa Seidenberg with Caught in a Whiteout. And next, let's go to Caleb Wolfson-Seeley.
Hi.
Hi,
Hey,
Caleb.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. I'll go ahead and read my poem. It is titled False Spring. For 3 afternoons, the yard believes. Snow forts cave into slushy tunnels, and that one blue mitten is finally unearthed. Mud loosens around the bones we buried in the January thaw. The creek wakes for the first time in months, groaning under rotten ice. For 3 afternoons, I believe, leaving my coat dangling from its hook like a question or a prayer. Even the birds forget the calendar, scratching for worms still frozen feet below. I wake to another colorless dawn, snow less like a soft blanket pulled across my shoulders than a pillow held too long against my mouth. Every puddle holds a thin pain of certainty, The creek murmurs through its teeth. I shrug on my coat like an apology, its questions answered, its prayers ignored. By afternoon, children rebuild their forts. Thank you.
Well, Caleb, I have to say that line, every puddle holds a thin pane of certainty, was like, oh, that is just such a good line. Like, really, really hit me. And, you know, an image, and then so impactful in terms of metaphor, too. And I love the concept, too, of the coat being a question, like a coat hanging by the door. I mean, it is a question. It's like, are you going to wear me? Are you going to? And now I see it that way, too. So I thought it was really interesting. And I did very much feel like it lived up to the prompt of feeling like I was right alongside you too, with being able to see the code and then outside. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Caleb.
Thanks, Miss Caleb. And where are you calling from?
I'm in Williamstown, Massachusetts.
Oh, nice. Well, so
Wonderful.
glad to have you here. Yeah, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I love that line that for the 3 afternoons the yard believes.
Yeah, I
You
know.
it's-
Yeah, so many great lines on that.
Yeah.
Poem. Yeah.
Next up, let's go to another first-time caller, Corey Olson.
Hi. Thanks
Hi,
for having me.
Corey.
Yeah,
Great.
thanks
Thanks
for
for
being
being here. Yeah.
All right. My poem is called Steady Hands. The captain's tone stays steady as we fly. The seatbelt sign ignites a sudden glow. Hands fold in prayer, we jolt in the sky. Think, it's nothing. A baby starts to cry. Out my window, the clouds begin to grow. The captain's tone stays steady as we fly. Service stops. Flight attendants hurry by. A sudden drop. I wonder what they know. Hands fold in prayer, we jolt through the sky. My hand grips too tight. Knuckles go white. Why? Lightning flashes. Must the sky put on a show? The captain's tone stays steady as we fly. Someone's hand meets mine. It's middle seat guy. I hold tight to the man I do not know. Our hands fold in prayer, jolt through the sky. Whole cabin lets out a collective sigh. Tray tables go up. We come in low. The captain's tone stays steady as we fly. Hands unfold. Prayers end. We clear the sky.
Well, Corey, I thought this was really smart to go to form to express this, you know, because as Joanna was saying during the interview, you know, with a villanelle, and we think of obsession, you know, when we think of writing a villanelle. And I know when I'm in that situation of turbulence, like your mind keeps turning back to it, right? Because a year ago we were on a boat. And we had, but I'm pretty good with plane turbulence because my mom was a flight attendant, so I've flown a fair amount, and I'm not so bad with that. But the boat turbulence freaked me out, you know, and you keep returning to it. And I think also the rhyme also like implied that it was bumpy, like the specific like loud rhyme that the poem had. So I thought it was really effective in doing it. And shout out to middle seat guy, wherever he is. Hope he's doing well now too.
That was definitely my favorite line to write.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. Thank you, Corey. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks so much,
Thank
Corey.
you.
Yeah. That was Corey Olson with Steady Hands. Next, let's go to Zachary Honeycutt.
Someone who's experienced some hurricanes, right, Zachary?
Yeah, I thought you guys were going to think I was going to write about a hurricane, but no, I did a
No.
tornado instead.
Mm.
As you can tell by this picture here. Yeah, so that was my house several years ago. And I never thought that I would actually hear the freight train sound of what a tornado sounds like early in the morning. But once you hear it, you know what it is. And
Wow.
there's actually 7 trees that fell on my roof. You can't see all of them. But when I heard it coming, I felt like the room was closing in, and I just knew what it was. And I just jumped out of my room into the hall, and then next split second, I hear the window break as a tree limb goes through it. And anyway, long story short, the whole neighborhood was trashed, and it kind of felt like walking around in the beginning of like a post-apocalyptic Stephen King novel or something, but not as fun. Anyway, and so this is a villanelle, but kind of a funky villanelle that I tried to shape into the form of a twister. Twister. The elements of raw surprise and sound rip through the night, roaring like a train, spinning up dirt and roots, whirling round. Young man stirs and awakes round 5 o'clock, while a locomotive gains the element of surprise and sound, uprooting trees from ground, crushing fences in my brain, spinning up my trust around all I took for granted now. Unseen rules that kept me safe from elements of dark sound. If there's truth to be found, we all make them. Rain dropping ideas around will always be found immortal and unscathed. If not for God, those sounds still spin up. I might not be around.
Well, first of all, Zachary, we're very glad you're okay from this. And I think I remember that series of tornadoes. 'Cause my parents live in Florida still, and I was really tracking it. It was like a horrendous, horrible day of weather like a few years ago.
Was that in South Florida or North?
It was like my mom's in Port St. Lucie, so it was there. And then I thought it stretched up to Central Florida and then started to go over to Gainesville and stuff, but I could be wrong. Yeah, that's what I thought, because I was really tracking it, because there were tornadoes all around my mom's house, but she was spared. And yeah, I mean, that I can't even imagine it. Well, I can imagine a little bit because you put it in your poem, but we're glad you're safe. And I wanted to say too that when I was reading it, I thought that the rhyme, it really felt like thunder going off. And it was this really interesting sonic effect that you gave us through that.
Yeah, I was trying to use alliteration, and I was trying to kind of, similar to Lisa, I was trying to make it feel chaotic, the shape of it and the words that I picked. But yeah, I'll never forget it. I hope I never hear that sound again. I'm glad your family was okay. Yeah, I didn't think I would ever experience anything like that. And that's how I really felt the end line there. Like, if that had come just tilted just a degree more to the left, it would have gone through the house, and, the roof could have fell in. So that kind of reaffirmed my faith in God. I felt like, wow, that just grazed us and knocked down the trees. Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful to find the positivity in a harrowing event, and at least to have this poem for us. And thanks for sharing it.
Yeah, I will. Next time I'm on, I'm going to share a important bit of information with you all, but I'll save it for next time.
Wow, the teaser at the end.
You guys
he knows how to do it. He's our PR man. Yeah. Thanks, Zach. Nice to see you.
You guys know what it is, because I told you guys a month ago, if you still remember, between all the thousands of submissions that I'm sure you guys have read since then. But yeah, and also shout out to Tina Dennetclaw. I'll be playing in her backyard this Wednesday night, reading a poem. So for anybody that wants to come or participate,
cool. That's neat.
Check it out. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So great episode, great poems, and I love that interview. She's awesome. I love her work. She's awesome. Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Zachary Honeycutt with Twister. And next, let's go to Leslie Ann Skechterson.
Hi.
Hey, great to see
you. Hi,
you.
Leslie Ann.
It's great to see you.
Great to see you.
And see everybody, because I've been traveling a lot again. Yeah. So I'll just, so this is a form of the burning Haibin, and it was, the first one I read was just a few months ago when Rich Yeomans won the Touchstone Award for his Haibin. And I thought, wow, what a powerful form this is. So of course, then I had to look up some more about it, and saw Tori Greathouse and all. And so not only is this the first burning Haibin I've ever written, it's probably the first Haibin where I actually ever wrote like prose instead of verse.
Wow, that's fun.
So I don't consider myself much of a prose writer, but that's just what spun out. And the only footnote is for the younger folks, James Mason references movie Heaven Can Wait. So waiting for the clouds to lift. Skinny skis slide up the Muir snowfield on this bluebird day. The summit of Mount Rainier rises closer as each glide is held by short hair skins on the bottom of my skis. Brilliant. This is mountaineer skiing. The morning climb up a long, steep slope, lunch in a panorama of peaks, then fly with fearless childhood determination, carving those telemark curves down virgin white slopes. Finally, at 10,000 feet, the skis come off and the three of us sit down. Just as my PB&J comes out, a thick cloud rolls in, hovers over us for a few seconds, then descends. Sapphire sky, mountain peaks, my friends, all vanish. I place a hand on my skis, like making sure my comfort blanket is still here. Voices wrap around me, originating from all directions and no direction. Sound waves, ocean waves, rhythms of the fog, ocean mist on the mountain. I am mesmerized by the sudden emptiness, the lack of visual borders, dangers, the peaceful fear to move in nothingness. I'm an astronaut on a stroll in space. Keep close to the capsule, don't know what's out there. One step too far and my body, my words will vanish from Earth into the mists of heaven. Is James Mason here, reprimanding the escort for his amateur mistake? I look for me, the little girl me that I never got to hold, to hug and cry with. Skinny, short hair, my climb up a long, steep slope, childhood. Carving curves down virgin white feet, down, my out. A cloud hovers over all. Comfort is here, originating from all directions and no direction. Fog, mist. I am mesmerized by emptiness, dangers, the fear to move. I stroll in space to know what's out there. Too far and my words vanish into the mist. Look for me, the little girl me, hold, hug. My childhood, white out over all the words.
Well, Leslie Ann, I have so much to say about this. Okay, so I'm like afraid I'm going to talk way too long. But first of all, I really enjoy this. Second of all, it's really interesting to me because I've only ever read one other Burning Hyben that I actually really liked, to be honest. And it was exactly the one you talked about. It was Rich Yauman's Dandelion Wishes, which won the Touchstone Award for Hyben. And the funny thing about that was that I was at the Haiku North America conference. And Judson Evans, this wonderful poet who is in the current issue, he was teaching this workshop on Burning Hyben. And I was like so skeptical because I was just like, come on, but it's Judson Evans. So it's like you go and you listen. And Lou Watts said, I got to tell you, Rich Yauman's has one that works, Katie. Because I was like, I don't think it can work. I don't think it can work. And he's like, Rich Yauman's has one. And I realized from that and also from your wonderful poem that it just has to fit the form so much. Like you can't just do it with anything. And in yours, of course, it really works because we're talking about the clouds lifting. We get this nice visual thing and it becomes a real concrete poem. So I think it's really successful and exciting and interesting.
Thank you.
And I can't believe it's the first one that you ever wrote because I tried to write one in that workshop and it was terrible. Like it sucked. So.
Well, I had no idea. It was like I got to writing and I got to where I took my sandwich out and the cloud coming in. And then immediately the haiku came to me. And
Wow.
we thought, and also, okay, Burning Hyben. And that middle part like connects it. And I thought I was gonna, so I finished the prose and I thought, well, I may have to rework some of this to write in the to make the middle part fit, but no, the words are all there. It's just figuring out, which part you don't need to make that leap. So it was,
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah, well, it was a really interesting take, and that's and Rich's function, of course, about memory loss and everything. So that was slipping away, which is a really beautiful interpretation of it. But I love it when somebody finds a way to find something I haven't managed to do myself. So that was great. Thank you so much, Leslie Ann.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was Leslie Ann Skechterson with Waiting for the Clouds to Lift.
And speaking of waiting, Mary Lisa's been waiting.
She has.
Very patiently.
It's okay. It's okay. I love it. I'm a night owl anyway, so
No,
it kind of works for me. Yeah, yeah. And thank you for inviting me to read. And I just want to say I really enjoy. I think I've said this before. I love to hear the reasons behind why you choose the poems you choose, because it reveals so much about craft. Even.
Aw, thanks, Mary Lisa.
So yeah,
thanks.
All very interesting. Yeah.
Thanks.
So, all right, let me read my poem. Let me pull it up. And I pulled up the wrong poem. Okay.
Well, you submitted 3, if I'm allowed to say that. So
I did.
It's great. I was really close
very...
between 2, and I was like, oh.
Whoa, that's good to know. I had a really productive week. It's amazing what like 1 extra hour a day can do. Like,
yeah, that is so true.
Right?
Yes.
Oh, amazing. Okay, let me see. It was the beginner's luck one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going in. Alphabet. I had it ready to go. It's being mean to me. B. There you go. Sorry about that. Okay.
That's okay. So many poems. They take a while to find which one. Yeah.
Oh my God. So many open documents. It's not even funny.
Good. That's my tabs. 15 open tabs.
Yes. You're not alone. Believe me, you're not alone. Yeah. Okay. Beginner's luck. We slipped past the stray dogs, vicious, staggering. We dodged the car wreck, the split head, the mean drunk. The man with the gun didn't shoot, he just took our money. And lucky us, we were nowhere near where the bombs were when their makers went berserk. The hurricane undertow sucked us under. The ocean closed its mouth around us, but spit our bodies back. The tornado chewed through the city, but spared us. The rivers rose to flood our homes. Fires spread, skies ignited, the earth seizured, mountains crumbled. Some of our bodies turned on themselves, and we nearly had to kill them to save them. But here we are still. Here we are still. The worst weather, the weather that changes us forever, all in our heads.
Yeah, cool ending there.
Yeah, I really love the ending here, Mary Lisa. And I mean, the point, I think, as I see it, that the whole poem makes, about how it is like imagining, like I have recurring tornado nightmares, for example. And sometimes if I feel scared, I'll like see a tornado in my head, and I have to be like, I'm making myself feel like this is actually happening right now, instead of, when I can control it, backing up from it. So I thought it made a really excellent point.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invite. It's always fun, and I come anyway. So,
well, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for all you do. Bye, Leslie Ann.
Bye. Mary Lisa D. Diminishes with Beginner's Luck, and that's going to wrap up our prop lines for tonight.
Some great poems.
Some excellent poems. Yeah, really wonderful.
Yeah.
And let's see. So what do you have for a haiku to close it out, Katie?
I never remember by this point.
I know. Yeah, me neither. Okay, so what do you have? Here we go. Bam.
Oh, yeah. The eye of the storm, seeing all.
The eye of the storm, seeing all. Very cool.
I actually put that at the end of my poem to start, and then realized it was not a haibun. It did not need that, and that was kind of like edging on summarizing the poem as opposed to expanding it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I could see that. Good point. But yeah, it works on its own though. Dozer who.
Thank you.
And here's mine. On a ladder, oiling the ceiling fan that fly. There you go. That was today. I never knew a ceiling fan needed oil. It never happened in my life, but ours is starting to get a little squeaky.
Yeah.
So we got up on that ladder.
Fly while you were up there. That's hilarious.
But not only
the fly, that gross.
Fly. There was this one fly months ago.
Always one fat.
No,
fly.
It was the one guy for like a month, and that's where he ended up.
You saw a fly body.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the story concluded for me on that one, finally.
There you go.
All
yeah,
right.
That's it. So, on a ladder, oiling the ceiling fan that fly.
That's funny. I enjoyed that.
All right, that's going to wrap up the show for this week. Next week's prompt on the Rattlecast is going to be what, Katie Dozier?
Think of something you didn't expect to open up but did. Make it risky.
Oh, risky?
Yeah.
Just opening? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So
risky.
Like a frozen yogurt restaurant or something.
Oh. I don't know. That's what Tim defines as risky, apparently. So I think, there are a lot of ways for something to be risky. Mm-hmm. I think poetry needs to take more risks. So there's that way of looking at it. There's actual mortal peril risk. Mm-hmm. But basically, I came up with the first part of the prompt and didn't want to be sent 400 poems about Rose's opening.
Ah, okay.
So it has to be risky. And I will be a little bit stricter on the risk component of this because of that. Because, we all have poems where things open up. But what we don't have is, necessarily risk in them or riskiness or risky business. In case Tom Cruise is watching the Rattlecast. All right.
Well, that is the prompt for next week. Next week's one programming note, I should say.
Oh, yeah.
Two, the critique of the week, which is Fridays. We're going to move it up in time. So it's going to be great news for some people, terrible news for others. I'm sorry, that's the nature of moving things in time. But we're going to move it up 4 hours. So it used to be 4 p.m. Eastern. Now it's going to be noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. on the West Coast. It's great for people in the UK or Europe if they're watching. But just, I think it makes fit our schedule a little better. So that's what we're doing.
I think so.
Yeah, we can scoot out on the weekends too, so a little earlier.
Get some dates out of this earlier.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we're going to move it up. It's going to be your lunchtime fun on that Friday. Get through the Friday workday with Critique of the Week at noon Eastern time now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just had an image that I needed to pack you a lunch for that, but I guess that's not true. You're probably good.
Probably going to make it. But
a lunch of poems.
Yeah, we're looking forward to those delicious snacks. All right. So next week's guest, that is the prompt. Think of something you didn't expect to open up but did and make it risky. The guest next week is going to be Jeffrey Bean. So another poet from our Invented Forms issue. He's got a really cool form he came up with in that issue. His newest book is Everywhere, Everywhere. We're looking forward to getting to know him more and exploring this book. He definitely got the poetry chops, so we're looking forward to that. Love all the formalist poets out there. That's Jeffrey Bean. Rattlecast 352, Monday, July 27th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Don't forget Critique of the Week's early. It's going to be noon from now on. So see you then. In the meantime, but have a great night.
Good night.